Hello again, this is Divine Erdrick, and it's time to geek out over Path of Exile. It's also time to geek out over this new microphone my brother is letting me borrow. Hopefully, there will be a noticeable improvement in my sound quality, so let me know what you guys think. So, I'd interrupted my geeking out over Path of Exile series with the Diablo wishlist series while working on getting footage for the next video. But last week, Grinding Your Games announced the next expansion in Challenge League, Synthesis. Like all expansions, Synthesis will bring balance changes, new skills, new items, and some new mechanics. Now the theme of Synthesis, Synthesis. I'm going to have trouble saying that all throughout this, aren't I? Anyway, its theme is fractured memories and, as the name implies, combining these fragments to make something new. Let's get the balance changes out of the way first. The focus for balance this expansion is on spells and spell casting. ZiggyD is attempting a full balance pass on spells to try to make many of the ones that have been left behind more attractive. But part of this focus is on what ZiggyD is calling hand casting, or what the community called self-casting. Over the years, Path of Exile players have used various mechanics to automate any skills but their primary damage dealer. One of the primary victims of this has been curses, which are nearly always automated to keep them up as often as possible. But for Synthesis, ZiggyD will be making changes to try to make hand casting a more enjoyable option. 3 gems have been revealed that are focused on this. And I know I haven't gone in depth into gems yet, but hopefully you'll still be able to see how cool these new gems might be. There are 2 new support gems that are aimed at hand casting. The first is called Spell Focus. Spell Focus is a support for area of effect spells, and it starts by increasing the area the spell hits. However, as you repeatedly cast a spell, the area will get smaller while the spell's damage increases. This will hopefully allow spells that may have been good for clearing large packs, but not so useful in fights against rares and bosses, gain new life. You'll be able to start a fight hitting most of the pack with each casting, then as you kill off the trash, the spell will become more effective for fighting any magic or rare monsters. In boss fights, you won't need to switch to a different spell, as hopefully the focus effect will happen quickly enough to keep the spell viable. Now the next support gem that they revealed, and I'm really excited about, is called Unleash. Unlike Spell Focus, which seems to be about spamming the same spell to increase its power, Unleash appears to be focused on multi-spell builds. While the spell linked to Unleash isn't being used, it will gain charges. Then, when you cast the spell, it will create a duplicate effect for each charge that was gained. Any spells that scale with multiple casting will love this support. Storm Call, which allows you to stack a lightning strike each time the spell is cast before it expires, immediately comes to mind. One thing I'm wondering with the introduction of Unleash is whether Fighter Mage or Gish builds might become viable. One example that comes to mind might be a Chieftain that focuses on fire damage and critical strike. The Chieftain could use a fire-based melee attack, Infernal Blow, which surges every 6 attacks, comes to mind, but use it igniting enemies with each critical strike. They could then use an Unleash Flame Surge, which deals extra damage to burning enemies, and finish off rares and bosses. Actually, that might be a fun way to create a Goku build using Face Breakers. Gonna have to look into that one. Well then, as one of the many new curse helpers, we'll be getting a new spell called Bane. Bane creates an area of damage over time when you cast it, potentially making it useful to dot builds, but more importantly, any curses linked to the spell will affect any monster hit. This will effectively allow players to hand cast multiple curses at the same time. And that brings us to the new spells, which are focused around creating 2 new character archetypes. The first is the Chaos Mage. Now, technically Chaos Mages already existed prior to Synthesis, but this expansion is going to be providing much more support for them. ZiggyD has already revealed 3 new spells. In addition to Bane, we will get Soul Rend. Soul Rend will be providing Chaos Mages with an easy damage spell. The spell sends out a projectile that homes in on enemies and applies a short but massive damage over time to any it gets close to. So the spell acts kind of like a direct damage spell for Chaos, while still benefiting from damage over time bonuses, such as from the next new spell, and that's the Malevolence Aura. Malevolence boosts all damage over time effects. This is great for Chaos Mages, but benefits any dot build, such as Burn, Bleed, and Frost builds. The next new archetype is the Holy Mage or Priest. With Synthesis, Path of Exile is getting a whole new type of spell. Holy spells. Kind of fits the archetype. These spells are themed around dual damage types, which are chosen from physical, lightning, or fire damage. So far, ZiggyD has revealed 4 new spells for this archetype. The first is called Purifying Flame, and it creates an explosion that generates shockwaves in consecrated ground. The second is called Wave of Conviction, and this spell appears to be an elemental damage dealer that, according to ZiggyD, will also reduce the resistances of enemies hit. But my favorite so far is Divine Ire. This is a channeled spell that deals damage to enemies in an area around you. This damage also builds up charges, and when you release the spell, it unleashes a massive beam in front of you. It could be a great Kamehameha for Goku, if it weren't for the fact it's lightning damage, and I'm probably going to have to build that one on fire. Any of these spells, plus all spellcasters, period, can benefit from the new aura, Zealotry. The aura increases spell damage and can create consecrated ground under enemies hit by your spells. And all of this works great with the new changes to consecrated ground that increase critical hit chances against all enemies standing on it. And on top of that, at least 2 of the old spells, Flame Totem and Stormburst, have been remade as holy spells. For new items, we'll be getting the new gems, of course, some new community-made divination cards, and 16 new uniques. Now, ZiggyD has touched on its plans for these and all future uniques. Chris Wilson has said that ZiggyD is happy with the field of basic and leveling uniques already found in Path of Exile. Now they plan to focus on making uniques that are just a bit more impactful. In particular, they want uniques to provide new means of playing and building characters, or to be endgame goals that players can work towards. The ones they've shown so far are Mask of the Tribunal, which creates a new way to play support builds, Nebulous, which encourages you to try to make single or dual elemental damage dealers with as high a resistance as possible so that you create characters that are embodiments of those elements. Storm's Gift gives players a new way to play with a mechanic that's popular in Path of Exile called Shock. Vixen's Entrapment is more support for curses and gives casters a new way to improve their defenses. And finally, the Eternity Shroud is not only a new unique in a class of special items called Shaper items, but it gives you extra chaos damage for every Shaper item you have equipped. This means the item becomes more powerful the more Shaper items you can find for your character. But of course, the largest component of any new league is the new mechanics and story. Synthesis centers around the spirit Cavus, who was once an important figure in the history of Rayclass. The only problem is Cavus's memories have been shattered, and he needs your help to recover them to solve the mystery of who he was and what happened to him. Throughout the league, you'll find fragments of Cavus's memory. Each one creates a timed run where you try to get to a memory stabilizer before it is lost completely. If you succeed, you'll gain the fragment and be able to use it within his mind to create paths to important events that were lost. These paths will act as custom dungeon runs that you can use to gain new rewards. The longer the path, the greater the challenge and the rewards. Among these rewards are new fractured items. These items represent lost treasures Cavus only partly remembers. As such, each one has properties that are a permanent part of the item and can't be changed. This means occasionally you'll find an item with an incredible ability you can craft around. However, most of these items won't be very useful as gear. Instead, they'll be used in the game's title mechanic, synthesis. Synthesis. Man, I'm really having trouble saying that word. 3 or more items can be combined to make special new synthesized items. This new type of item will have a special permanent property called an implicit modifier. Without going into too much detail, implicit properties are essentially a free bonus that an item has that doesn't normally affect crafting or is affected by crafting. So no matter what you do, you keep that bonus. Now GGG is being secretive about how synthesis will work, but we will have some control over the modifiers we get. And in addition to common useful modifiers used by most builds, we'll also be able to get rare and special modifiers normally not found on most items. Now there are many more announced changes coming in synthesis, and I'm hoping to talk about them more as this series continues. But one I do have to mention is the change coming to the game's music, as it might make one of the points in the video I'm working on obsolete, at least once synthesis releases. I look forward to when I can point you all to my own mechanics videos for these League announcements. Until then, I encourage you all to check out Engineering Eternity, Mathilfication, and ZiggyD to learn more about Path of Exile and Synthesis League. This has been Divine Erdrick, and I hope to see you all in Rayclast.